chances are, if you're tuning in today, you're thinking about the future, right? Maybe even specifically about your investments. And, one of the big questions for 2025 is, should I be looking at gold? Does gold deserve a spot in my portfolio this year?
Yeah, that's the question on a lot of people's minds. We wanted to really get into this, so we dug into a pretty in-depth strategic investment analysis to try to bring you, the listener, the most important insights on whether gold could play a role in your portfolio next year. Think of it like this. You don't have to spend hours reading through all this stuff. We'll kind of bring you the main
I
points.
think that's what a lot of our listeners are here for, right? Just to get to the bottom of it. Gold, of course, has this reputation. It's legendary, right? Protecting wealth, something people have relied on for centuries. But the financial landscape is, well, it's always changing. So is gold still relevant? Is adding gold to your portfolio in 2025 a smart move? Or are there just better options out there?
It really is the big question, isn't it? And, just because gold has this history doesn't mean it's a guaranteed win in 2025. Its relevance really depends on a whole bunch of factors that are all changing at the same time. I mean, what we really want to do today, our mission, is to make sure you understand both sides of the story. Why some analysts are really bullish on gold and why others are, well, maybe a little more cautious. So you can make an informed choice, right? At the end of the day, it's your money.
Exactly. We're all about giving you the information, not telling you what to do.
Yeah.
So let's start with the positive side. Why do some experts think gold could be a good thing to have in your portfolio this year? What's the main argument for it?
Well, one of the biggest things that came out of this analysis was this idea of inflation, persistent inflation. And it's not going away anytime soon. Even though central banks are doing their best to fight it, there's a lot of evidence that inflation is going to be sticky because of all these problems we're seeing, like problems with supply chains, climate change is starting to really have an effect. And of course, labor costs are higher and they're not going down.
I mean, yeah, I think we're all feeling that, right? The rising cost of, well, everything. So how does gold usually perform in that kind of environment when prices are going up and up?
Well, traditionally, gold has been a pretty solid inflation hedge. And there's a reason for that. When regular currencies like the dollar start to lose their purchasing power because prices are rising, inflation, gold tends to hold its value much better. Gold is a tangible asset. It's something you can hold, and there's a limited supply of it. And this hedge effect becomes even stronger when you look at what are called real interest rates. Real interest rates are basically the interest you earn on your investment minus the rate of inflation.
Okay, so like what I'm actually earning after inflation eats away at it.
Exactly. So if those real interest rates stay low or even become negative, well, then suddenly the fact that gold doesn't pay any interest isn't such a big deal anymore.
Makes sense. I mean, if my cash is losing value anyway and other investments aren't keeping up, gold starts to look a lot more appealing because it's at least holding steady.
Mm.
So besides this whole inflation picture, what else could make people want to invest in gold in 2025?
Well, another big factor is the geopolitical situation, and let's face it, it's pretty uncertain right now. I mean, there are serious tensions in different parts of the world. You look at the South China Sea, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and this kind of uncertainty makes people nervous. They want to put their money somewhere safe, and gold has this long history of being a safe haven during times of crisis.
Yeah, we saw that play out this year, right, when things heated up in the Middle East.
Absolutely. The report actually highlighted the gold rally that happened during the Iran-Israel conflict last year, 2024. That was a clear example of what happens when things get tense on the world stage. Investors flock to gold because they see it as stable. It'll hold its value even when everything else feels shaky. And on top of all that, we're seeing this trend towards a world that's a lot less unified. Countries are starting to act more independently, and the relationship between big powers like the US and China, well, it's not getting any easier.
So basically, when the world feels like a riskier place, gold shines.
Yeah.
Because it feels like a sure thing. Got it. Okay, so what else is making gold potentially attractive as we head into 2025? What's another reason why it might be a good investment?
Well, there's this really interesting trend that's been happening, and that's central banks buying up a lot of gold. We're seeing this especially with central banks in emerging economies, places like China, India, and Saudi Arabia. They're buying gold to diversify their reserves, the money they hold in foreign currencies.
So we're talking about a lot of gold being bought, not just a little bit.
Oh, huge amounts. The analysis showed that these central banks bought over 1,000 tons of gold every single year, from 2022 to 2024. That's massive. And when these big institutions are buying that much, it can create a floor for the price of gold. There's so much demand that it's less likely to drop significantly. And, some people think this is a sign that these central banks are a little worried about the long-term stability of the US dollar as the main reserve currency in the world.
So it's not just individuals, it's these huge institutions, the ones responsible for a country's wealth, they're betting on gold too. That's a pretty strong signal. Is there anything else that supports the case for gold in 2025?
Oh, absolutely. Another big thing to consider is all the debt that's out there, the global debt and the risk that comes with it. A lot of developed economies are carrying a lot of debt, way more than their economies produce in a year. And in the US, the situation is getting kind of scary. The analysis actually predicts that by 2025, the interest payments on the US national debt could be bigger than the entire defense budget.
Wow. Okay, so that's a lot of money just to pay interest.
Yeah.
How does that tie into gold?
Well, when debt levels are that high, it makes people worry about things like a financial crisis, maybe even countries devaluing their currencies because they can't afford to pay back all the money they owe. In those kinds of situations, gold starts to look really good because it's seen as a much safer store of value than currencies that might be losing their worth.
Right. It's like a hedge against things going really bad in the economy, a way to protect your wealth if currencies start to crumble. Interesting. Okay, so we've got inflation, geopolitical uncertainty, central banks buying up gold, and a mountain of debt. Is there anything else that could make gold a good investment in 2025?
There is. And this one's a bit more about looking forward, thinking about the future. We're seeing more and more demand for gold from technology and industry.
So not just jewelry and people investing in it.
Exactly. It's still a relatively small part of the total demand, only about 10%, but gold is being used in all sorts of new and exciting areas. Like they're using it in AI infrastructure, renewable energy technology, even high-tech medical devices.
Because of its properties like conductivity.
Yeah, things like that. Gold is a great conductor. It doesn't corrode easily, so it's really useful in these cutting-edge industries. And as these sectors grow, they're going to need more and more gold, which could drive up the price even more.
Okay, so there are some pretty solid reasons to think about adding gold to your portfolio this year. But like with any investment, there are always two sides to the story. What are some of the reasons why someone might not want to buy gold in 2025?
Well, the biggest concern right now is that interest rates could stay high. If the Federal Reserve keeps interest rates elevated, in that 4.5% to 5% range to fight inflation, then other investments that actually pay you interest, like bonds, are going to look much more attractive than gold, which, well, doesn't pay an interest.
That makes sense. If I can get a good return on a relatively safe investment like a bond, why would I bother with gold that's just sitting there not earning me anything? What else might hold gold back in 2025?
Well, another factor is the strength of the US dollar. It's the world's reserve currency, and it often moves in the opposite direction to gold. So if the U.S. economy stays strong and the dollar keeps getting stronger, that could push down the price of gold, especially for people who are buying it with other currencies.
Right, because it becomes more expensive for them to buy gold with their weaker currency. We've
Mhm.
seen that happen before. Okay, so high interest rates and a strong dollar could be bad news for gold. Anything else?
Yeah, there's also the competition from cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin and Ethereum, they're becoming increasingly popular, especially among younger investors. And some people are starting to see them as a kind of digital gold. They like that they're easy to transfer and that they have the potential for big gains, even though they're also very volatile. And now that we have spot Bitcoin ETFs in the US, crypto is looking even more legitimate to a lot of people.
Yeah, it feels like for a lot of younger investors, especially those who are really into tech, crypto might be more exciting than traditional gold. It's like a new digital way to protect your wealth and maybe even make a lot of money.
That's the thinking. They offer something different, a different set of possibilities, even though the risk is much higher than with gold.
So we've got high interest rates, a strong dollar, and competition from crypto. Anything else that could make gold a less attractive investment in 2025?
Historically, gold hasn't done so well when the stock market is booming and the economy is growing rapidly. So if sectors like AI or emerging markets take off in 2025, gold might look pretty boring in comparison. Investors who are looking for big returns are going to put their money into those high growth areas, not gold.
So if your main goal is to maximize your returns, gold might not be the best choice in a strong market. Okay, last thing on the negative side. What about all the talk about sustainability and ethical investing? How does that play into the gold conversation?
That's a good point. Some investors are really concerned about the environmental and social impact of their investments, and gold mining, well, it doesn't always have the best track record. There's deforestation, mercury pollution, and sometimes even problems with how workers are treated in certain gold mines. So investors who are focused on ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors, they might decide to avoid gold altogether and look for more sustainable investments.
It's definitely a growing consideration for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've laid out the arguments for and against investing in gold in 2025. There's a lot to think about. So for our listener who's trying to make sense of all this, what are the key things they should be watching out for as we move through the year?
The most important thing to keep an eye on is the Federal Reserve. If they start talking about cutting interest rates later in the year, that could be a really good sign for gold. Remember, a weaker dollar is good for gold.
So any hints about the Fed's plans on interest rates, that's something to pay attention to. What else?
Keep an eye on how cryptocurrencies are being regulated. More regulations could make them more attractive to some investors, but they could also highlight some of the risks. And, the recent approvals of those Bitcoin ETFs, that's a sign that things are changing in the crypto world, and that could have a big impact on gold.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if that's the start of a bigger trend. Okay, so the Fed and crypto regulations. What's the third thing to watch?
Watch what's happening with global currencies. If more countries, especially big players like the BRICS nations, start moving away from the US dollar and using gold for international trade, that would create a huge increase in demand for gold.
Okay, so three things to keep track of. What the Fed is doing, what's happening with crypto regulations, and whether other countries are starting to use more gold. So, based on all this, who do you think should consider adding gold to their portfolio in 2025, and who should probably stay away?
I think gold makes a lot of sense for investors who are mainly concerned about preserving their capital and who want to protect themselves from big swings in the market. It's also good for people who are worried about inflation eroding their purchasing power over the long term. And, in some emerging markets where the local currency isn't very stable or there are restrictions on moving money out of the country, gold can be a real lifeline. The analysis actually mentioned Nigeria and Argentina as examples.
So it's about safety and stability, protecting yourself from risk. Who shouldn't be buying gold?
Well, if you're looking for big growth, if you want to see your money multiply quickly, gold is probably not the best choice, especially if the stock market is doing well. And if you need your investments to generate income, to pay your bills or supplement your retirement income, gold isn't going to help you there because it doesn't pay any dividends or interest.
That makes sense. It's all about matching your investments to your goals. Now, for those who do want to invest in gold, are there easier ways to do it than buying actual gold bars or coins?
Absolutely. For most people, it's just not practical to store and keep physical gold safe. There are much easier ways to get exposure to gold. One way is to invest in a gold ETF, like SPDR Gold shares. Their ticker symbol is GLD. They're very liquid, which means you can buy and sell them easily, and the fees are pretty low. Another option is to buy stock in gold mining companies. One example is Newmont Corporation, ticker symbol NEM. They can give you even bigger gains if the price of gold goes up, but they're also riskier. And then there's this new thing called digital gold, which is basically gold that's represented by a digital token on a blockchain. One example is Pax Gold. It combines the benefits of blockchain technology, transparency and efficiency, with the stability of physical gold that's stored in a secure vault.
So there are a lot of options for people who want to invest in gold without actually having to deal with the hassle of storing it themselves. So as we wrap up this deep dive into gold, what's your overall take? Is gold a good investment for 2025 or not?
Well, based on everything we've looked at, I think gold can be a very valuable part of a diversified portfolio. It's not going to be a high-growth investment on its own, but it can help you protect your wealth from things like currency devaluation, geopolitical turmoil, and, of course, inflation.
So it's more of a defensive play, a way to add stability to your portfolio.
Exactly. The analysis recommended allocating maybe 5% to 10% of your portfolio to gold, and they suggested using low-cost ETFs or digital platforms because they're the easiest to buy and sell. But it's really important to remember that gold is just one part of a well-balanced portfolio. You still need to invest in things like stocks, bonds, and alternative investments if you want to grow your wealth over the long term.
Diversification, that's the key. Gold is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. And, in a world that's changing so fast with all this new technology like AI and all the challenges from climate change and geopolitical instability, I think gold is still relevant. It's still a form of financial insurance. But as we talked about, its performance is going to depend a lot on those macroeconomic trends. So it's important to stay informed and keep track of what's happening in the global economy.
This has been a great conversation. I hope it's given our listeners a much clearer understanding of gold and its potential role in their portfolios in 2025. At the end of the day, the decision of whether to invest in gold is a personal one. It depends on your financial goals, your risk tolerance, and your overall investment strategy.
I agree. It's all about what's right for you.
And with that in mind, here's something for you to think about. As the world becomes more interconnected and digital, how do you think the role of traditional safe havens like gold might change over the next decade? I mean, will it adapt? Will something else take its place? This deep dive was just the beginning. Keep researching, keep thinking critically, and stay engaged with these important trends. And thanks for joining us.
If you found this discussion informative, please like, subscribe, and share this channel to get daily discussions on a current economic topic.